Amazing. So I've got 100 million individual questions for everyone, but I want to kick things off with a question for the whole group. So I would love to know, I think when I think about beyond access, I think about the long arc of a student's journey. I think about bringing in coordinated systems, increasing the number of stakeholders and sectors represented in this room. And I also really think about how we can shift from surviving to thriving in the field, how we can do all of the work that Ved articulated about contemplating housing, contemplating reentry as an integral part of the programming that we do through higher ed institutions. So I want to know, long wind up, what is one thing from your vantage point in the field that really signals to you that we are making that switch beyond access, that we're really moving into a place of bringing in additional stakeholders and really thinking about the field in a much more multifaceted way? And I won't make anyone go first, so have at it.
I mean, I'm sitting next to you, so I guess I'll jump in first. And first, I just want to say welcome, NCHEP 2026. Can we make some noise? This is so exciting. I also want to give a shout out if my P2P family can make some noise. There's a lot of us in the room. Much love to the P2P family that's here. So I think, for me to answer that question, first I just want to share a little bit about myself and my journey. So, I am Stanley Andrisse. I am a formerly incarcerated person with multiple felony convictions. I was sentenced to 10 years in prison as a prior and persistent career criminal. I had a prosecutor pushing for 20 years to life in prison because she felt that I had no hope for change. Fast forward some time, I did my time. I'm now Dr. Stanley Andrisse, endocrinology scientist, tenured associate. Newly tenured professor at Howard University College of Medicine. I always like to call Howard the Mecca of HBCUs. We're the #1 producer of Black and brown scientists and physicians in our country. Also was at Johns Hopkins Medicine for some time, visiting professor at Georgetown, took my talents across seas to a place called Imperial College London. So didn't live up to that expectation of this prosecutor that was many years ago. And to your question, I just want to let the audience know that I was on this stage about 8 years ago. And when I was on the stage as the keynote for the NCHEP conference in 2018, I was the first formerly incarcerated person to be a keynote for the NCHEP conference at that time. And one of the things that I was mentioning then was that we shouldn't have gotten to year 8 of this conference called the National Conference of Higher Education in Prison before a formerly incarcerated person stepped on the stage. And part of the message that I was delivering then was that we need more formerly incarcerated leadership in the field. We need more directors of programs to be formerly incarcerated people. We need more directly impacted leadership at all ranges of the process of getting a PEP program operational. Looking back at that and talking on access and beyond access, where we're at, I just want to give a new shout out that in that message of wanting more formerly incarcerated leaders and for them to be directors of programs, I would love to give a shout out to Dr. Kelsey Becklin. I don't know where she's at, but Dr. Kelsey Becklin is a formerly incarcerated leader who is the new executive director of the TREC College and Prison Program in Minnesota. So if we can give a round of applause to Dr. Becklin. Okay, I got you. Thank you. And I think, so when I think about where we're at since that time, there's only, and we have another, of course, formerly incarcerated leader leading a program. There was 0 formerly incarcerated directors of prison education programs 8 years ago when I was giving that speech, and now they're slowly becoming, there's more of us moving into those types of positions. So I think that is something that is we're making progress, but I think, we still have a lot farther to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think.
We'll take the pressure off and just go down the seating arrangement, I think. It's always great to sit beside the professionals who are here, and thank you for the invitation, and always thrilled to be a part of anything that Stanley is a part of. I think in terms of an accreditor perspective, which is one you maybe don't hear so often or think much about in terms of partnership, we are thought of more along the lines of compliance or mandated expectations. But what I'm seeing with our commission is the building of a community of practice. And if your accreditor is not positioning these programs in that same way, then you should advocate for that with your accreditor. We have an amazing number of programs. We have quality programs and experiences that deserve to be celebrated and shared. And my commission is incredibly proud of the ways that we do that, and we want to do it even more prominently for these students and for the institutions and the states and our partners that are supporting such important work out in the field.
So, as said in my bio, I spent a long time in this field. Over 30 years, I grew up in corrections from a teacher up. And what I have found is that I believe corrections has become more modern, more collaborative, building of partnerships. I am amazed and just so excited to see the integration of how people who are formerly incarcerated and those that are incarcerated have started to shape and shift policy and how we practice corrections in this country. I have the honor to sit on the American Corrections Association Board of Governors, and the conversations that occur in that room are very much centered around the experiences of the people who we serve and for whom are in our care. And that is a shift that has been amazing to see in the last 5 to 10 years within corrections, in my opinion.
Hi, everybody. I have to start by just saying I am drawing so much energy from this room right now. What a beautiful, fantastic, humongous group of people you are. And I have to give my shout outs to my Portland State team, extraordinary. Thank you all. Yes, like Stan said, so I appreciate you sharing this, Stan. I myself am a multiple, felon and have done decades of research, field research in, navigating the systems to crawl my way out of where those systems landed me. And so while myself had the opportunity through my higher education experience, non-traditional student, of course, right, did not see myself reflected in higher education, was given an opportunity, through my college to elevate. And, the shift that I'm seeing today are different leadership opportunities. Another shout out to the Rockwood Fellowship. Woo, woo! And those cohorts will continue. So I'm seeing a shift there, but I think also, just with our program alone, we have multiple Portland State students here today in the audience. And so having that opportunity for students to come and be connected to this network is a huge shift that I'm seeing all across the nation.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I do feel like even just yesterday, Nahlee, you and I were in a state coalition learning group, and we're now shifting to talk about how can we make sure that currently incarcerated student voices, right, not just formerly incarcerated leaders, but how can we get those voices at the center of conversation around policy and practice, which I think is exciting and incredibly important movement in that direction. I'm gonna come back to you if that's okay, because I think when we're thinking about students and beyond access, I'm really thinking about kind of the longer arc of the student's journey, really being at the center of Pell, honestly, like Pell reinstatement. We need to think about the students and whether they are benefiting, and that benefit means more than just a degree. It means, can you take those credits and transfer to another place? It means if you get out before you finish your program, can you finish on campus, right? There's so many, I think, longer arcs that we're now being, through the regulation, really forced to think about in a productive way. And so I want to think a little bit about reentry and hear from your perspective, leading the program that you do at Portland State University. How is reentry kind of central to what you're doing now?
Yeah, thank you. This is a great question. So, the student experience is really at the forefront of the work we do. I think, from even prior to matriculation, we're really looking at students inside, and doing targeted recruitment to where we are really reaching students before they're even really exploring their identity as a scholar or as a college student. Shout out to Sierra, our college navigator, who is doing all of that work with the many hats that she's wearing. But often we're reaching students who are earning their GED while they're incarcerated, right? And most of them will return to the community at some point. Many will not. And so, we're looking at that intersection as well, is how do we reach students to really explore identity building and belonging and finding purpose and meaning in that space, both to explore what their future might look like as a scholar, should they return to the community, but also, what does that meaning and purpose look like for a student who doesn't have a release date or a long sentence? And so I would say, the start of our reentry process starts there. But as we're designing, our programs inside, we're really thinking about, all of the agency with the students and really pulling in student voice in every decision that we're making so that we're targeting our programs to both student need and interest. That often requires to be reflexive and adaptive. And it's a good thing, right? Because we're learning from the mistakes that we're making, we're growing, we're changing, and we're doing that while serving students and what they need and what they want and what they desire. So what that looks like for practices inside is, the targeted recruitment, the collaboration with students early on. We're supplying ample information, equipping students with the information needed to make the informed choice, whether that is to go to a career or technical program inside, whether that is to go to the community college, if they have prior college credit, right? All of the things, answering all of the questions so they can start that exploration and identity building of what that trajectory might look like. What are the start and stop points? Are you doing the vocational program now? Is that of interest to you? Is that available to you? Come and see us after. We're gonna be here, right? What credits of that will transfer in? What articulation agreements exist throughout the state in all of those different spaces? And so that's one thing that we're really working on is, really equipping students with the information so they have that agency themselves. And of course, we're here for those questions. But I would say too, providing opportunity with FaceTime with our staff, right? Not only the information handed in a sheet, but the one-on-one sessions where they're learning to read a DARS report as a student, multiple terms, so that when registration time comes the next term, they say, I've read my DARS, I know exactly what courses I need and require. These are the amount of credits I need to graduate, right? And can make those informed choices on their own trajectory, given the limited options that we have for course selection, right, and the physical space constraints. So what that looks like for practice in reentry is that, we're really thinking about targeting and tracking, release dates, from matriculation, and thinking about that exploration and what students' plans are. So in the state of Oregon, we have one women's prison, right, where we operate in. That's our PEP site. And I don't want to leave the men's facility out because that's important too. But for the purpose of the PEP, we're going to be talking about the women's site. Women are paroling to all parts of the state, right? And so it's really important that we're able to have those conversations early on about what the plan is, right, for not only the first day of release, right, but maybe a student is taking a term off. Maybe they need a few terms off to transition, back into the community. Whatever that plan is, they have kind of a step-by-step play of when they're going to connect with us and what those next steps are. There are a lot of just logistical things that need to happen within the bureaucracy of, setting up your student account and setting up your physical address and changing it from, the prison address and all of those things. But for students who are in parts of the state that are not geographically close to campus, that can be challenging, right, for us to be able to maintain that community and provide sense of belonging. So part of what I would say our reentry program is beyond connecting with our reentry navigators and our college navigators and doing that transition planning on campus is finding opportunities with our partner departments and colleges for ways for students to connect. So when I say that the reentry starts inside, it's also connected to something that we didn't anticipate when we launched a liberal studies degree. So the nature of the interdisciplinary degree means that we partner with pretty much every department on campus, right? And so while inside, students are receiving the social capital there, right? And so they know these professors, and then when they come to campus, they have this direct connection to the professor and the department. And so we've seen multiple opportunities where students are either engaged in focus groups or have been selected to be an ambassador for a department, internship opportunity, different career opportunities. And I think that's something we just didn't anticipate to be part of what we would consider the reentry program. But more on the student side, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot over the years of what works, what doesn't, the different student needs that arise, what our office can actually provide, what resources that we actually have available, and what we don't. So the limitations of what our program can do. And so we really work on, what we can do and making it clear what we can't. But we really are landing space for students. We have a reentry student space connected to our staff offices, and that's the space where students belong, they can be, they can explore, they can laugh, they can drink coffee, and they can also get their questions answered about the various departments and logistical things that need to happen to navigate the complicated system at Portland State. It's a safe space. It's a safe space where there's colleagues as well. But we also then are connecting folks to other resources on campus. And I'm going to stop there because it will lead into my next question answer. But a big part of our reentry that we are working on is really trying to integrate into the larger system at PSU. And so we can really connect students to resources that we don't have available that exist on campus. For the purpose of, student services, formerly incarcerated students are experiencing unique circumstances to their situation, but students in general are experiencing challenges and barriers, to navigating college. And so that's not unique to departments that serve students. And so I'll talk more about that in a little bit, and I'll stop there.
No, I love the connection between what Carrie mentioned earlier about trying to make sure that incarcerated students are brought up in all of these different Title IV conversations, right? I think there's something similar going on at campuses where formerly incarcerated students are becoming central to all of the conversations on campus in, Veterans Affairs departments, things like that. And so I think that's really central to kind of dispersing that support for reentry. I'm going to come to you next, Heather, if that's okay. So you have talked a lot about sort of myth busting around accreditation and accreditation as a student-centered practice. Can you talk a little bit about that in the context of prison education programs and why that seems particularly central to understanding a creditor's role here?
Absolutely. When we talk about access to education, it also has to include access to all of us that are engaged in this work. And that includes accreditors as well. And so as Carrie was talking about the work of her agency and needing to needle and thread the experiences for all students into the work that pertains to Title IV and the other work of the Department of Education, we too have done the same. Anytime we look at policies and procedures, we have to consider all student populations in order to make them what they need to be for all student populations. And a good example of that relates to our complaints and third-party comment policy and procedure, where students have an opportunity to tell us, as the accreditor overseeing quality at an institution, if they have concerns or if they have a complaint, and we have a formal complaints process. All students have to be able to access that complaints process, and for some populations that's more difficult than others. So we wanted to remove those barriers, and we are proud that we were able to do that so that we could ensure all students have access to us and to providing feedback to us about their experience. The work we do is student-centered. Our standards for accreditation revolve around the students. And so making sure we have policies and procedures that do all of that is critically important. I want to just note, because I know Vid, and I wrote this down, am I enough for this space? He said at the outset of his remarks. We want to make sure students understand they are enough for the space. And we do that by sending our representatives to meet with them and talk with them about how their experience is in their program, about the services they're receiving, and about perhaps where a program is falling short, so that we can get conversations around how to improve that experience for students. I appreciate, Carrie, that you brought up negotiated rulemaking. I am the alternate negotiator for next week's AIM committee, so I'm looking forward to that. But Stan and I had an experience together around prison education programs because we both worked with that committee. Stan has since forgiven me for the positions that I took as a negotiator. He and I were engaged in a lot of discussions, not always coming to agreement, because I was seeing regulatory burdens that I wanted to understand the return on investment. If we are going to ask for institutions to invest more, if we are going to increase the costs of accreditation work around prison education programs, I wanted to understand the return on investment. Stan and I are now good friends, and we came to a similar conclusion through those negotiations, and we really respected each other's perspectives, which I think got us to the important conclusion where we came. Stan has since presented at webinars for our commission. We had incredible support from others. He and I serve on the Maryland Department of Correction Advisory Committee together, and so developing those really critical engagement opportunities, whether at the table of negotiated rulemaking or somewhere else, getting at the table together so that we can carry the perspective of our student voices, which sit differently among all different perspectives, but to get them aligned and advance the field. I'm really proud that we were able to do that together.
I love that. I did not know that history.
Yes.
I'm glad I didn't know it before. I might have been like, okay, we're going to put Stan on the end here, and then we're going to put Heather over here.
we want to be next to each
but
other.
no, I think you brought up something really important, which I think is that in order to do this work in a way where we're not just thinking about getting into a program, we have to have the perspectives of all of the folks that are thinking about how much does it cost to host site visits for accreditors, right? And then folks that are thinking about, okay, I had only one option when I was in facility. What are we going to do to make sure that the students that are in facility now have pathways, have choices, like Nahlee was talking about earlier? And so I think it just encapsulates that anecdote, I think, a lot of what we're trying to accomplish with bringing more stakeholders and sectors into this space. So Stan, I want to pull back a little bit and talk about pre-college, if that's okay. So I think one of the cool things that I've really admired about your work is some of the college preparatory, college access focus, because in the work that I do, which is primarily with cross-state agency work, I've been really struck by how siloed the pre-college experience is when it comes to the agencies, and how that can kind of trip up. I know we're not talking about access anymore, but that can kind of trip up this pipeline, I think. The sort of what you've described in some ways as like the reverse school to prison pipeline, right? The GED to college pipeline. Can you talk a little bit about how, under this broader heading of Beyond Access, we're thinking about how to build that continuum from pre-college to thriving career?
Yes, most certainly. And just also to shout out Terrell Blunt, who was also on the negotiated rulemaking. He was on the prison education subcommittee. So shout
We
out to
can't
Terrell
see all in
Blunt.
the lights, but yeah.
And Terry McTeer as well. So we're the three of us. Yes, shout out to Terry McTeer as well. The three of us were the only formerly incarcerated people on the committee, and I was the only formerly incarcerated person that was one of the voting members of the larger negotiated rulemaking committee. And it was a growing experience, and I do appreciate that. And of course, really love where we've grown to this point. And so I also, tied to answering the question, also wanted to just point out that through Jobs for the Future's Ready for Pell program a few years back, we had P2P had the great opportunity to serve as technical assistants for the Portland State University program that Nahlee now leads. She wasn't leading then. We were encouraging them to help make that move, and we worked and helped with that process. So really thankful to see that, as I mentioned earlier in my earlier remarks. Similarly, I don't know how this happened. Through Ready for Pell, we were the technical assistants for the TREC program as well, and happy to see that Dr. Becklin is leading that program. And I want everyone to get their phones out if they're on the app. I actually dropped some poll questions that address this question that you're asking. So if you go to the app, you can see that there's 3 questions related to this session. The questions are beyond access, where are we really, and the biggest barrier, what is the biggest barrier right now to limiting higher education access in prison today, and how many leaders in your organization are formerly incarcerated. And there's already over 300 responses. I would love for you all to continue responding to that. At my 2018 keynote, I also had a live poll go up, and one of the questions, I asked a number of questions, but one of the questions I asked to the formerly incarcerated people in the room, and I asked them, are they pursuing career paths that they want to be pursuing? And at the time, most of them said that no, they're pursuing what is available at that, what was available to them at the facility they were at. So I think, as Nahlee was just mentioning, it's important that we continue, as we go beyond access, beyond just having prison education programs at facilities. I know in Maryland, we've worked with the University of Maryland system that has colleges all over the state. We really want to, in Maryland, we're looking to provide the opportunity to go to whatever program you wanted to go to. So we actually are setting, Maryland is DPSCS, the corrections in Maryland wants to set up a way that you can apply to any of the multiple college education programs that are inside, and they will just move you to the facility. So you're not just limited to that one program. So I think to that point that was made in my 2018 keynote, that we need to move beyond that. The field is starting to think in that way of beyond access, of allowing people to really do what a career trajectory that they really want to do. So I think that is part of how we see it. With us at P2P, we believe that we want to help people. Our mission says that we want to help people excel beyond what society and life circumstances has set to be the norm. So we had this bold idea to really push people into pursuing their dreams and what they feel that they want to do. And I think that encompasses this idea of beyond access. So I hope that in this time, when I get to my next question, I hope to kind of show some of the responses from the poll. But I think, one of the things that was encouraging to me is that one of the question around how many leaders in your organization are formerly incarcerated, there's a good number of responses that say that they do have leadership that are formerly incarcerated. In my 2018, I surveyed that same question, and there was basically 0.
Wow.
So to see that change happen tells me that the field is really growing in the direction of really letting those closest to the problem be closest to the solution.
That's awesome. Yeah, so get to the poll, guys, so we can get a representative sample there to circle back to. And I think the idea of how to advance leadership from folks with lived experience, I think gets to one thing that we've talked a lot about lately in the New England states, which is this idea of equipping folks for the 21st century, for work in the 21st century, for leading, for trailblazing the 21st century. And so Jen, I want to come to you, if that's okay, because in your time with ODRC, the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, you were able to successfully secure, distribute, mobilize 10,000 Chromebooks, and you really made it a point of your time leading there to equip folks, both in higher ed and not, with digital 21st century learning experiences. Can you talk about why that is so important and central to the work we're doing today?
So, first of all, I want to say this. I didn't do that. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And so I really want to speak to the importance of collaborating and working cohesively to obtain a goal. So I had the honor to work for the former director at DRC. She had a great passion for the education within corrections and believed that it was a rehabilitative necessity. And so I had a fabulous school system staff. I'm looking, where's Dr. Biggs? I had a fantastic team in my school system. I had a great relationship with our IT. They didn't always like me though, not gonna lie. But the DRC leadership, it took my college partners, it took all of us as a cohesive unit, believing in the why, that 21st century access to education mattered. The people who we served, we knew were going to leave. And I don't know how many people in the room still write checks. I do, but I am of a certain generation. But like, that's not real anymore. So if anybody thinks that they are constructing a system that allows people to successfully re-enter and they don't give them digital skills, I would argue that they are doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What has amazed me in my time with corrections is seeing how many leaders of DRC or DOCs are opening their eyes to the idea of a 21st century education model. Because at the end of the day, our education within our systems shouldn't look different than it would in the community. It shouldn't. The fun part of it was getting this coalition of people to work together. To be honest, it's what drew me to JFF.
Yeah.
This concept of a coalition of people. My JFF people, woo! I'm gonna give my shout out, woo, to my JFF people, because I retired from DRC to JFF.
Yeah.
Because of the concept of understanding that it takes more than one. No one person can make this happen. I just can't tell you how amazing the group think became around this idea. And so we developed an entire wireless network that wasn't just in our schools, it was in everywhere. It was in dorms, it was in program areas. The students that we served in post-secondary as well as secondary were able to access education outside of school at any time. We did virtual instruction at our highest security prisons. So they were doing synchronous virtual instruction, but I didn't do that. I couldn't do that. Yeah. So really, it's about all of us working together to make a goal happen, and that's how you do that. And I'm going to give another shout out to my corrections folk across the nation. So many other agencies are starting this path. So many are in trajectory to do it. My Texas people, they just got funded for it. Indiana's working on it. Idaho, Maine, so many people. Oregon, they're working on this. Yeah. Be patient, we're getting there. So that's how you do it.
Thank you, thank you. I really appreciate underscoring the coordinated effort that takes, because I do think one of the fascinating things we've seen is that, you know, there are agencies that kind of naturally lend themselves to this coordinated work, right? And then there are agencies that are kind of sitting on the sideline being like, should I care about this or not? And one of the things that's fascinating is when you talk to them, I'm thinking Department of Employment Security in one of the states that I've had the privilege to work in, and you talk about the way that job applications and career prep is done in facility, and it's like, that's not compatible, right? Like if you're not applying to jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed and you don't know what that looks like, there's a gap for that agency to even join in the conversation, because they're talking in a 21st century language, and what's happening in facility is 20th, 19th, I don't know, yeah. So I think that's just such a great point, that you need the coordinated systems, then also you get more folks in the room when you're doing something that makes sense, because we do it every day in our jobs, right? So I think we're gonna transition a little bit here to talk about, and you kind of teed it up perfectly, Jen, in order to make these big moves and think about these larger arcs of student trajectories and make massive infrastructure investments in states, we really can't just have one group of stakeholders. And in fact, the more people in the room, the more we can get at all of the different aspects, right? Like maybe in 5 years, there'll be a ton of folks focused on housing development here. I don't know if they're in the room today. So I want to think a little bit about coordinated systems, and specifically about how we're seeing that come up in our various strands of work. And so, Heather, I want to talk a little bit to you about how the accreditors are coordinating amongst themselves to think about higher education in prison, to think about program approval, and how they're kind of drawing on and building strength both within and beyond.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And following Jen's remarks, this is just perfect timing, because building a coalition includes accreditors and accreditation as partners in the work. And beyond the monitoring and the compliance, we want everyone to understand how the triad works together. That's our federal partners, our state partners, and then us as accreditors. And that is to meet the minimum requirements that are required for approval of prison education programs. But we want to have greater influence in that conversation beyond what the regulations may require or what approval processes may be needed. And so, you know, I have to recognize Belinda Wheeler, who was with the Vera Institute at the time. I know she's here.
We all love Belinda, wherever she is.
She really helped us center and focus around what we needed to prepare institutions with, what we needed to do with states, what we needed to do with departments of correction. You can imagine, and you have experienced that undertaking of bringing very diverse constituency groups together around a conversation to best build this effort and best build these programs. And I do have to recognize the work of Danielle Cox in Maryland. She has been amazing, and she has been a model for other states, for us, and I'm sure beyond even the states that we represent. She just so intentionally jumped into building standard operating procedures. There were reflective practices. The advisory committee was giving feedback and making that a foundation that would be very easy for others to follow and for the committee to see the trajectory of how these programs would come through that pipeline. So for us, we were being led by others as an accreditor, and we really appreciated and needed those critical partnerships at that time so we could build upon the expertise we already had around prison education programs, but really begin to drive the new and important conversations around the regulations. And I think that started happening right away when the conversations were happening during that negotiating period, where we were able to think through what it is that we would need to do. So we were able to give quite a bit of feedback. We were able to bring other partners together. New York State was trying to figure out, how do we function? How do we model this? And we were able to lean on what was happening in Maryland as a leader around some of this. But I do just want to say, we obviously monitor the progress of these programs. We do ask for reporting around the status of each of the programs. We will look at and review ourselves the best interest determination. We have reporting requirements around that, separate from what happens at the Department of Corrections. So we're well positioned to do all that work, but we're excited about it. A couple of areas that have been challenging, though, have been managing conflicts of interest. For our agency, we obviously oversee the institution as their institutional accreditor, and so we always have to be mindful of navigating potential conflicts of interest for us on advisory committees, but we are able to really serve as partners in the work, and I know that is really something we want to be able to continue to do and support.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love the accreditors that we get to work with at NCHEP, and so just grateful to you for sharing that perspective on sort of the community that's forming and the agencies that you have engaged with to sort of draw on their expertise. Jen, I'm going to come back to you to say, you know, I think folks that are in the room that manage programs, they work with their departments of correction in each of their states on a regular basis. What do you think is something that folks in the room should know about how corrections is shifting to being more interested in this sort of coordinated, collaborative approach?
Okay, so how many people in the room have heard about Fair Chance to Advance? The JFF, right? Okay, for those of you that didn't raise your hand, go across. There's a table. So Fair Chance to Advance is that. So it is a Jobs for the Future Ascendium partnership where we are working to get corrections connected intentionally with purpose to other state agencies, to college partners, to people with lived experience, to employers on building systems that really help the people that we serve move from an education to an employment model. And not just employment, but quality employment. And it is an amazing program. Again, I came to JFF. I literally retired from DRC to come to JFF.
Took like one day off,
this,
I think.
right?
Yeah.
Because it is such a fantastic and amazing approach to deliberately building those intentional partnerships. And because, again, I said this earlier, I'm going to say it again, no one person can do this work. It takes the village. The village is important. And so I'm very excited for that. And I hope, for those of you that did not raise your hand, that you also become excited by going in and not just visiting our table, but shameless plug. Some of my colleagues will be doing a whole session about it. So please join that session. The other part of Fair Chance to Advance that, again, speaks to building collaborative units is we are working with our friends from the Alliance and the Corrections Education Association to bring in a new cohort of the Corrections Education to Employment Leadership Academy, of which I get the great honor to lead up with the JFF work on that. And we are going to have a cohort of around 12 people, maybe. We'll see what the numbers look like. to start working with emerging leaders to build that group to understand and appreciate the value of all of us working together towards the goal. So shameless plug, the application is now live. For that, again, if you need the connection, it's at the table across the way. And I am excited to see that work happen. I'm excited to see where our 4 states who are selected, including our friends here from Oregon, for the fair chance to advance. It's Oregon and Kansas. I know Kansas is in the room, Maine, and it is our friends in North Carolina that we get to work with to not just showcase what they can do, but to hopefully build to the next group and the next group so that this becomes a 50-state initiative and the entire United States starts working collectively towards advancing what the fantastic, marvelous, talented people we have in our system can help us transform our country to be.
I love that, because I do think that one of the shifts I see in the field, just in my experience, is this shift from solo champions to systems that are supporting the work. Because I do think when you have coordinated agencies, when you have coordinated stakeholder groups, then when one person decides to move on, or one person, decides to go in a different trajectory, you haven't lost all of the work there.
Can I add one thing? Because I
Please.
think that speaks a little bit to, so tidbit of information, when the RFP, or the request for information, when it went out in August, 46 entities said they put in a letter of interest. 31 states applied. Over half this country was interested in that work. That's a shift in corrections we haven't seen.
Yeah. And people were, in our 6 states in the region, they were excited about it, they were talking about it, and I think willing to put forth the effort for an RFP of that caliber, which is amazing. I want to be cognizant of time. Is this timer mean we have 5 minutes left? Okay. So I'm going to give one question to you, Stan, and then we might need to jump into our lightning round, if that's okay with you all. So it's 2010. You've talked a little bit about the shift from 2018 to now, but let's go back to 2010. It's the first NCHEP. The ACA has just been passed. I'm a New Orleans girl. That's just after the Deepwater Horizon spill. Kesha's TikTok is everywhere, right? A different kind of TikTok for the young people in the room. And so what do you think folks who attended that first NCHEP would think coming into this room here today?
Yeah, I think, Second Chance Pell wasn't even around yet. Pell reinstatement has been accomplished. So I think, it's quite courageous what those founders of this conference did in a time where, higher education in prison really wasn't what it is now. And I think this conference and the group of people and the body of people that are in this room today have helped it grow to where it is. So I think there would be just, this wow to see the 200 plus PEPs that are around and the leadership aspect of formerly incarcerated leaders that I mentioned. So I think that's what will be surprising. I think there might be some, where are we going now? And I think that's what the Beyond Access framing is that we're at now. So that's what I think would be what people are thinking. I want to myself give a quick shout out to a couple of sessions that we have. So I encourage you to check out our booth, which is right back here, the From Prison Cells to PhD booth. We have a new book out, Breaking Chains, Building Futures. Encourage you to check that out. It has some curriculum in terms of what people would be unexpected of maybe from 2010, is that there is communities like what we've created at P2P that has this village of several hundred people from across the country, currently and formerly incarcerated men and women who are moving into leadership positions like Dr. Kelsey Becklin. And this book encompasses that story. Breaking Chains, Building Futures is about the leadership of formerly incarcerated people in this space and in other spaces in the country, and the work that really elevated out of this room. So really would encourage folks to stop by and take a look at that.
The numbers are turning a different color now, which I think signals urgency. So we're going to do one lightning round. The way this is going to work is I'm going to ask a question, give your answer, an explanation in one sentence, and then we're just going to keep it moving and give other folks too an opportunity to shout out where they can find you and your organizations at NCHEP. So Ved talked a little bit about this idea of risk and about sometimes not necessarily being able to take risks and not being able to see risks as opportunities and shifting that mindset and opening up the possibilities of risks. So I want you to tell the folks out here today, the field is growing, the field is maturing, but we don't want to get too comfortable. So what's one risk that we need to take to continue this trajectory and forward motion beyond access? I'm going to start with you, Nahlee, because
Oh, well, if I would have
stiffed
had
you
a
a
few
question.
moments to talk about my next question, I would have said, no. I mean, we have to dare to ask, right, for the things that we need and we want. That could be in the correction space, it could be with students, it could be in the college space, it could be with community partners. We have to ask, because I think too often we think that, oh, we can't do that here. So.
That's amazing. Yes.
So I'm going to add to what you just said, and it's going to be a little different twist. I'm going to say one of the greatest risks that people don't talk about is letting bureaucracy stop us. And so I'm not saying don't follow bureaucracy. I'm not saying that. No.
Follow your
not what I'm
rules
saying.
as needed.
What I'm saying is you should look at bureaucracy not as an end game, but as the steps necessary to get where you want to go.
Yes.
And find your bureaucracy navigators, because those people are your friend in the state-based work. Yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't plan this, but mine was rise above the regulations. The regulations set a minimum, and I think everyone should be eyeing the work above those regulations and really finding ways to feature the good work that's being done that goes above the regulations. And tomorrow it's Ask the Accreditors from 9 to 10. I gotta slip that
There we
in
go.
before
There
I
we
get
go.
too-
Okay, Stan, close this out.
I would say that we need to fund and follow the leadership of formerly incarcerated scholars. Take that risk of funding and following that leadership. Oftentimes funders want to go with comfortable filling organizations and not newer grassroots where the leaders really understand the challenges. So I would say fund and follow the leadership of formerly incarcerated scholars.
That is a great note, and now it is red, so we are done. So yes, funders, take risks. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Ved, Mara. Thank you to the amazing panelists. And this is just the start of the conversation, so it continues.